Welcome back! For weeks, we have been watching the news coming from Ukraine. One of the main topics was the list of official reasons for the war, as explained by President Putin. Some of his claims were interesting, to say the least, but as Western media outlets were busy interpreting and denying these allegations, the process itself reminded me of past events. In this video, I will describe two examples to illustrate why such claims are not extraordinary. In fact, they are standard operating procedure. The first Gulf War started in August 1990, but to understand its background, we have to go back to 1979, the Iranian Revolution. Previously, both Iraq and Iran had been parts of a long chain of countries whose job was to encircle the Soviet Union and contain communist influence. The regime change in Iran created an Islamic Republic which turned against US domination, so countermeasures were taken by the Americans, who wanted to regain full control in the region. They provided resources, political support, and even weapons to Iraq, which, under Saddam Hussein's leadership, invaded Iran, starting the Iraq-Iran War that lasted 8 years and ended in a stalemate with high casualties. Iraq was removed from the list of countries supporting terrorism. France and West Germany supplied more weapons, but Iran could not be broken. During the war, Iraqi debt ballooned. This was partially financed by Saudi Arabia, but the UAE and Kuwait increased their oil production to replace losses due to the war, which further reduced Iraqi income. Saddam complained about a lack of financial support. Relations with other Arab countries soured, and Kuwait refused an Iraqi demand for $10 billion to cover lost revenues. The response was an immediate invasion. Saddam's forces overran Kuwait in 2 days, but this move turned international opinion against him. He became the bad guy who had to be punished in the name of freedom and democracy. Gaining public support was not difficult. In August 1990, the UN Security Council condemned the invasion, while in October, Kuwaiti witnesses were heard by Congress. They detailed war crimes and atrocities committed by Iraqi forces. Although some of these witnesses were not who they claimed to be, their stories were made up, so they had been prepared by PR agencies to be more credible. The true goal was the protection of Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, as they had significant oil reserves on which the entire world relied. More than 30 countries joined the coalition. Even Afghanistan sent a few hundred mujahideen to push back the Iraqis. Regime change was not on the table, but after stopping an Iraqi attack in Saudi Arabia, a quick counteroffensive started, with heavy bombardment and major tank battles, inflicting heavy losses on Iraqi forces, while coalition troops took minor casualties. In February 1991, Kuwait was liberated. Coalition forces entered southern Iraq, while a CIA-run radio station encouraged rebellion within the country. An uprising broke out, both in large Shia cities in the south, but also up north, organized by Kurdish leaders. Since no American support came, both uprisings were brutally crushed, while the emir was restored in Kuwait, and the two sides concluded their peace talks. To keep costs low, the US chose to keep Saddam in power. Soon, more than 500,000 soldiers were moved out of the Gulf, but the story would not end there. Returning soldiers reported illnesses. This became known as the Gulf War Syndrome. Massive oil spills and fires had to be put out, which required serious effort, but severe sanctions remained in place to prevent more trouble. From our perspective, the most important detail is that once Saddam was no longer one of the good guys, he had to be restrained. Once the decision was made in Washington, because that's where such decisions are made, the public had to be convinced, which is why the propaganda machine was immediately employed. It didn't really matter why Iraq had to be defeated. The only thing the public had to understand was that Saddam was now one of the bad guys. Stationing coalition forces in the Gulf alienated Islamic fundamentalists, many of whom had been CIA assets before, during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan back in the 1980s. One of these individuals was Osama bin Laden, member of the wealthy bin Laden family of Saudi Arabia. In the 90s, he worked with the Taliban government in Afghanistan to crush the opposition, relying on his Al-Qaeda militants. He was involved in the 1998 US embassy bombings, in which 200 people were killed. Then he organized the September 11 attacks that shook the world in 2001, although he would deny this until 2004. His presence in Afghanistan provided the casus belli for the American invasion. The next step would be the Second Gulf War, after Congress granted President Bush the necessary power. Iraq was once again labeled as a supporter of terrorism, even though Saddam Hussein killed all the terrorists he could get his hands on, and he had zero involvement in the September 11 attacks. The claim was made that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction, false evidence was provided, but not everybody was convinced. France and Germany refused to participate in the war. Nonetheless, the conflict commenced in March 2003. Iraq was quickly overrun. The country was occupied by coalition forces. Bush declared that their mission was complete, but in reality, it was just the first phase. A new American civilian administration was soon installed. It fired all the Ba'ath Party officials and military officers, depriving tens of thousands of their only source of income. These men turned against the invaders and continued to resist even after the 2005 national election, which led to the creation of a new government with Nouri al-Maliki as its head. Many of them belonged to the Sunni minority, which had ruled the country under Saddam. They were afraid of the Shia majority that the new government represented. Sectarian violence increased. The country descended into chaos. Occupation forces could not stop the process. The new Iraqi army was weak and divided, so militias took over. In subsequent years, terrorist attacks and open clashes between the various factions destroyed entire districts. American forces were first sent back to their bases. They lost their mobility, but then changes at the top gave them a more energetic leadership, along with the surge, which once again increased the number of troops stationed in the country during Bush's second term. Al-Qaeda, which had not been present in Iraq before the invasion, was now a significant force. Iranian influence over the government in Baghdad continued to increase, while the Americans were trying to fix the situation by employing independent contractors instead of regular troops to reduce casualties and reassure the public. Troop drawdowns were delayed even under President Obama. They finally commenced in 2010, but Iraq remained divided and chaotic. The emergence of the Islamic State in 2014 showed that the government in Baghdad did not have full control over the country. Vast areas were conquered by these extremists. After years of stalemate, a counter-offensive was launched by the reorganized National Army, which now relied mainly on Shia officers and conscripts. IS was gradually pushed back, with utter devastation in central and northern Iraq, from which the country is slowly re-emerging 19 years after the initial invasion. The examples above show that great powers can come up with any excuse to launch a war. There's not much the UN or any other international organization can do about that. While Putin claimed that Ukraine had to be denazified, former American presidents emphasized the need for human rights, democracy, and freedom. In the end, war always means devastation and suffering. It's not simply about the fight between good and evil, but we tend to forget this, especially as new generations grow up without experiencing war up close and personal. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.